Welcome back, guys. Today, I will be breaking down simple questions you can always ask to outsmart the cops during a traffic stop. Let's go. A police officer walks up to your car window and says, "License and registration. Where are you headed tonight?" You hand over your documents. Then the officer pauses. "Mind if I take a quick look inside the vehicle?" Now your heart starts racing. You haven't done anything wrong, but suddenly the questions keep coming. Why are you nervous? Whose bag is that? Step out of the vehicle for me. At this point, most people make the same mistake. They start talking. Talking, too much explaining, too much volunteering. And without realizing it, they hand the officer exactly what they need to extend the stop, search the car, or build suspicion. So what do? What should you say? Can a police officer legally stop you without a valid reason? And what are the exact questions that instantly expose whether the stop is lawful or whether the officer is fishing for consent and trying to create probable cause? Because one sentence can completely change the direction of a police encounter. One careless answer can open the door to a search. One emotional reaction can escalate everything. And one simple question, asked calmly and correctly, can force the officer to reveal whether they actually have legal authority for what they're doing. In this video, you're going to learn 5 powerful questions that can protect your rights during a police stop. Most people don't know their rights until it's too late. If you want to stay one step ahead and never get caught off guard, hit subscribe now. And if this opened your eyes, share it with someone and tell me your thoughts in the comments. Let's go. Not magic words, not internet myths, not sovereign citizen nonsense. Real-world questions that help clarify whether you're detained, whether the officer has legal grounds, and whether you're accidentally giving away your rights. You'll also learn the biggest mistakes people make during stops, what officers are trained to look for, and the exact phrases you can use without sounding aggressive or combative. Because the goal is not to win the encounter on the roadside. The goal is to get home safely while protecting your rights. The first question is probably the most important one in any police encounter. Officer, am I free to go or am I being detained? This question matters because many people don't realize something critical. Not every interaction with police is legally a detention. Sometimes officers approach people casually to gather information, start conversation, or look for suspicious behavior. If you voluntarily stay and keep talking, you may accidentally extend the encounter yourself. Here's how it often happens. "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" Most people assume they have no choice. Then 10 minutes later, they're being questioned about where they've been, whether they've had anything to drink, whether they have weapons, and whether they'd mind a quick search. But the moment you calmly ask, "Officer, am I free to go or am I being detained?" you force legal clarity. If the officer says yes, leave calmly. Do not stay to explain yourself. Do not keep chatting. Do not ask sarcastic questions. Just leave. If the officer says no, now you know you are officially being detained, which means the officer should have legal justification for continuing the stop. Notice the wording. Not, "Why are you harassing me?" Not, "You have no right to stop me." Instead, "Am I free to go or am I being detained?" Short, calm, clear. That question alone prevents thousands of people from accidentally consenting to voluntary questioning every day. Now here's the second question. What crime do you suspect me of committing? This is where many illegal or weak stops start falling apart. A lawful detention generally requires reasonable suspicion that a crime has occurred, is occurring, or is about to occur. Exactly what counts as reasonable suspicion depends on the facts and the law in that jurisdiction. But here's the trap. Most people never ask why they're being stopped. They immediately start defending themselves. "I wasn't doing anything. I live around here. That's not my backpack." The problem is, you may be answering accusations that haven't even been made yet. Instead, calmly ask, "Officer, what crime do you suspect me of committing, officer?" This question does 2 things. First, it locks the officer into an explanation. Second, it helps reveal whether the stop is based on actual facts or just vague fishing. Listen to this scenario. "Sir, you were acting suspicious." "What crime do you suspect me of committing, officer?" "Well, we got a call about someone in the area." That distinction matters. Being suspicious by itself is not always enough to justify every level of detention or search. And if the officer cannot clearly explain the basis for the stop, that may become important later in court. Notice something else. You are not arguing, you are not resisting, you are documenting the interaction verbally and calmly. That matters because officers often pay attention to tone and behavior when deciding whether to escalate. Now let's talk about the third question, and this one is huge. Do you have a warrant or are you asking for my consent? This question can save people from one of the biggest mistakes in police encounters: consenting to searches. A shocking number of searches happen because people simply say, "Sure, go ahead." Not because police had a warrant, not because they had probable cause, but because the person gave permission under pressure. Here's how officers often phrase it: "You don't mind if I take a quick look, right?" That sounds casual, friendly, informal. But legally, consent can completely change the situation. So instead of arguing, ask this: "Officer, do you have a warrant or are you asking for my consent?" If they're asking for consent, you can calmly respond, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." That sentence matters because it clearly states you are not voluntarily giving permission. Now pay attention here. Do not physically resist a search. That is critical. If officers search anyway, do not fight them physically on the roadside. Instead, say, "I am not resisting, but I do not consent to any searches." That wording protects you in two ways. It shows non-compliance with the search request legally, but not physical resistance. Big difference, because the roadside is not the courtroom. Trying to physically stop officers can escalate fast and become dangerous. The fourth question is incredibly important once officers start asking investigative questions. Am I required by law to answer that? People talk themselves into charges every single day, not because officers forced confessions, because nervous people keep filling silence. Have you had anything to drink tonight? Do you know why I pulled you over? Whose backpack is that? Mind telling me where you're coming from? Sometimes these questions seem harmless, but officers are trained to observe inconsistencies, nervousness, changing stories, and admissions. And many people accidentally provide probable cause through casual conversation. That's why this question matters. Am I legally required to answer that question? Sometimes the answer is yes. For example, in some states, during lawful traffic stops, drivers may be legally required to identify themselves or provide license and registration information. But many investigative questions go beyond basic identification requirements. And if you are not legally required to answer, you can calmly say, "I choose to remain silent," or "I would like to speak to a lawyer before answering questions." Those phrases work because they are direct and legally recognizable. But here's another mistake people make. They partially invoke their rights. They say, "I probably shouldn't talk." Then they keep talking. That does not help. If you invoke your right to remain silent, stop volunteering information afterward. Now, the fifth and final question may be the simplest. Is this an order or is this a request? This question helps separate voluntary cooperation from lawful commands. Officers sometimes phrase requests in ways that sound mandatory. "Why don't you step over here for me? Go ahead and unlock your phone. Mind lifting your shirt? Take your hands out of your pockets." Some commands may absolutely be lawful for officer safety during a detention. Others may simply be requests for consent or cooperation, and in stressful situations, people often cannot tell the difference. So ask calmly, "Officer, is that an order or is that a request?" This question forces clarity without confrontation. If it's an order, comply peacefully and challenge legality later if necessary. If it's a request, you may have the right to refuse. For example, "Officer, I do not consent to unlocking my phone," or "I prefer not to answer questions." Again, calm tone matters. Everything changes when emotions rise. People get themselves into trouble by trying to outsmart officers, insult them, lecture them on constitutional law, or turn the stop into a roadside debate. That almost never helps. Remember this framework. Do not argue, do not run, Do not make sudden movements. Do not physically resist. Do not consent casually. And do not talk yourself into problems, because officers are watching more than your words. They're watching body language, tone, movements, nervous behavior, aggression, inconsistency. The safest approach is controlled, calm, and deliberate communication. Now, a very important legal clarification. Laws vary depending on the state, the type of stop, and the specific facts involved. Traffic stops are different from pedestrian stops. Border checkpoints involve different rules. School zones, airports, and federal property can involve different standards. And what officers can legally do often depends on evolving case law and specific circumstances. So this video is educational information, not personal legal advice. But these questions help you avoid the biggest mistake people make during police encounters, giving away rights they didn't realize they had. So let's put everything together. If you're stopped by police, stay calm. Comply with lawful commands. Ask, am I free to go or am I being detained? Ask, what crime do you suspect me of committing? Ask, do you have a warrant or are you asking for my consent? Ask, am I legally required to answer that? And ask, is this an order or is this a request? If needed, clearly say, I do not consent to searches. I choose to remain silent. I want to speak to a lawyer. And remember the most important thing of all. The roadside is not where you win the legal battle. The goal is to protect your safety, preserve your rights, and avoid making the situation worse. Because the smartest move in a police encounter is not sounding tough, it's staying controlled. And in the next video, we're going to break down the exact phrases officers use to trick drivers into consenting to vehicle searches without realizing it. Thank you for watching till the end. See you in the next video.